Good evening, and welcome back. Tonight, we're going to drift slowly into the quiet, ancient world of Greek mythology. So wherever you are in the world, whether you're lying in bed, sitting in the dark, or just needing a moment of calm, take a deep breath and get comfortable. There's no need to focus too hard. No need to remember every name or every detail. Just let the story carry you. Let your thoughts slow down. As we travel back to a time before cities, before history, before even the sky itself had a name. A time when the world began, not with order, but with silence, with chaos. And from that silence, everything slowly, gently came into being. So close your eyes if you'd like, and let's begin. In the beginning, before the rise of mountains, before the whisper of wind, before even time had learned to move, there was nothing, no sky, no earth, no sea. There was only chaos. But chaos was not chaos in the way we understand it today. It was not noise or disorder or madness. It was something far older, far deeper, a vast, silent emptiness. A yawning void without shape, without direction, without light. It was not evil nor good. It did not think, did not feel. It simply existed, endless, boundless, alone. And yet, from this infinite nothingness, something began to stir. Without warning, without reason, the first forms of existence emerged, not crafted by hands, nor born of intention, but rising naturally, as if the void itself could no longer remain empty. The first of these was Gaia. She was the earth, not merely soil and stone, but the very foundation of all that would ever be. Vast, stable, and enduring, Gaia spread herself outward in all directions, forming a solid presence where before there had only been emptiness. She was the first place where anything could stand, the first hint of permanence in a formless void. In her, the idea of ground was born. Alongside her came Tartarus. If Gaia was the surface, Tartarus was the depth beneath it, a dark and unfathomable abyss. Deeper than any ocean, more ancient than any mountain, Tartarus was not simply a place, but a presence. It represented the hidden, the feared, the unknown. Even in these earliest moments, existence was not only light and life, but also shadow and descent. The universe had already begun to balance itself, and then came Eros. Eros was not yet the playful god of love later myths would describe. In this earliest age, he was something far more powerful. The force of attraction, the invisible bond that draws things together. Without Eros, nothing would unite, nothing would grow. He was the quiet force that turned isolation into connection, stillness into creation. Through him, the universe gained its first spark of movement. From these first beings, existence continued to unfold. Out of chaos, or perhaps from the spaces between these first forms, came Nyx, the night. She arrived not with sound, but with presence. Nyx was darkness, but not emptiness. Her darkness was rich, heavy, alive. She draped the universe in shadow, not to destroy it, but to give it depth. In her presence, things could hide, could rest, could dream. Even chaos itself seemed to recoil from her vast and quiet power. With Nyx came Erebus, the embodiment of deep darkness, the shadow that dwells beneath the world, within it, around it. Where Nyx was the night sky, Erebus was the darkness of hidden places, the unseen corners of existence. Together, they formed the first true pairing in the cosmos, night and shadow, presence and absence, seen and unseen. From their union, something remarkable emerged. Aether was born, the pure, bright upper air. He was light in its clearest form, the brilliance that would one day fill the heavens. Where Nyx and Erebus brought darkness, Aether brought clarity. He was not just light, but the space in which light could exist, the breath of the divine, the realm of the gods yet to come. And alongside him came Hemera, the day. Hemera was the opposite of her mother Nyx, yet forever bound to her. Each would follow the other in an endless cycle. When one arrived, the other would depart. Thus, without conflict, without war, the first rhythm of the universe was established. Night giving way to day, darkness yielding to light, and light eventually returning to darkness. It was the beginning of order. What had once been a silent, endless void had begun to take shape, not through design, but through emergence. Each new presence defined the next. Earth gave form, the abyss gave depth, love gave connection, night gave contrast, and day gave clarity. The universe was no longer empty. It was becoming something, and what is most remarkable is that this transformation did not come from intention or command. There was no creator standing above it all, no guiding hand shaping the world. Instead, existence unfolded naturally, as if the void itself carried within it the potential for everything. From nothing came something. From silence came structure. From chaos came the first fragile threads of order. This early cosmos was not yet a world of gods and mortals, of stories and struggles. It was simpler, yet more profound, a place where existence itself was learning how to exist. Each new force did not replace the old, but added to it, creating a layered reality where light and dark, depth and surface, stillness and motion all coexisted. In this way, the foundation of everything was laid. Not with tools, not with plans, but with presence. Chaos did not disappear. It remained, vast and eternal, beneath all things. But around it, within it, and rising from it, the first elements of reality had begun to take shape. And from these first beginnings, from Gaia, Tartarus, Eros, Nyx, Erebus, Aether, and Hemera, the rest of the universe would follow. Mountains would rise, seas would surge, gods would be born, and wars would be fought. Love, betrayal, creation, and destruction would all trace their roots back to this moment. But at the very beginning, before all stories, before all names and legends, there was only this quiet miracle, that from absolute emptiness, the universe found a way to become. And in that transformation from void to form, from darkness to rhythm, lay the first and greatest truth of all. The world did not begin with order, it became ordered. After the first stirrings of existence, after chaos gave way to form, and darkness learned to share the sky with light, the universe was no longer empty. It had begun to breathe, to take shape, to move in quiet rhythms of night and day, but it was still incomplete. It needed structure, it needed a world, and so, from Gaia, the earth herself, that world began to rise. Gaia was not merely land. She was the foundation of all things, the great mother who bore existence within her vast and fertile being. Where she stretched, there was ground. Where she settled, there was stability. She was both the stage and the substance of creation. But Gaia was alone. Though she held the potential for life within her, there was nothing above her, nothing to meet her, nothing to complete the balance of existence. And so, from herself, she brought forth Uranus, the sky. He was vast and endless, arched high above her, studded with the first distant lights that would one day become stars. Uranus was not separate from Gaia in the way later beings would be. He was born from her, yet also became her counterpart. Where she was solid and enduring, he was boundless and ever-reaching. Together, earth and sky formed the first great union of the cosmos. There were no witnesses, no rituals, no spoken vows. Their union was not one of ceremony, but of necessity. Uranus stretched himself across Gaia, covering her completely, and in their joining, the world found its first true form, a dome of sky above an endless earth. From their union, life began to multiply. Gaia, ever fertile, gave birth to the first generation of powerful beings, the Titans. There were 12 in all, 6 sons and 6 daughters, each embodying vast and elemental aspects of the world. They were not yet the refined gods of Olympus, but ancient, primal forces. Oceanus, the great encircling river; Hyperion, the light of the sun; Cous, the mind that seeks knowledge; Creus, the pillar of the heavens; Iapetus, ancestor of mortal life; and Cronus, the youngest, quiet, watchful, and cunning. Among the daughters were Theia, radiant mother of light; Rhea, destined to bear the next generation of gods; Themis, the embodiment of divine order and law; Mnemosyne, memory itself; Phoebe, bright and prophetic; and Tethys, the nurturing waters. Together, they formed the first ruling order of the cosmos, vast, powerful, and deeply tied to the natural forces of existence. But Gaia's creation did not end with them. From her depths came beings far more terrifying. First were the Cyclopes Brontes, Steropes, and Arges. Each bore a single eye in the center of their forehead, glowing like a forge. They were beings of immense strength and raw power, creatures who would one day shape thunder and lightning itself. They were not subtle, nor gentle, but they were essential embodiments of creation through force. Then came the Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed ones. They were monstrous in form, each with 50 heads and 100 arms. Their strength was beyond comprehension, capable of shaking the very foundations of the world. They were chaos given shape, overwhelming and unstoppable, beings who carried within them the raw violence of existence. These were not children meant for peace, and Uranus, the sky, saw them and feared them. Though he was vast and powerful, though he stretched endlessly above the world, Uranus was not a loving father. He looked upon his monstrous offspring not with wonder, but with dread. In their strength, he saw not potential, but threat. In their power, he saw the possibility of his own downfall. And so, driven by fear, he made a terrible choice. He forced them back into Gaia. One by one, the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires were pushed deep into the earth, imprisoned within the very body of their mother. There, in darkness and silence, they were bound, hidden away, where their power could never challenge him. It was not merely imprisonment, it was betrayal. Gaia, who had given birth to them, who had carried them within her, now felt their weight pressing painfully inside her once more. The earth groaned beneath the burden of its own children. What had once been a place of life became a prison of suffering. And Uranus did not stop. Night after night, he descended upon Gaia, covering her completely, pressing the sky down upon the earth. There was no space, no relief, no escape. Gaia endured, but her endurance began to turn into something else. Pain became anger, anger became resolve. She could not allow this to continue. And so, from her own body, Gaia created something new, not life, but a weapon. It was a sickle, forged not of metal, for metal did not yet exist, but of jagged flint, sharp, unyielding, born from the earth itself. It was a tool of change, of rebellion, of inevitable consequence. With this weapon, Gaia turned to her Titan children. She spoke to them not as a ruler, but as a mother in pain. "Your father has wronged me," she told them. "He has imprisoned your brothers. He has turned creation into suffering. Who among you will stand against him?" But the Titans, for all their power, hesitated. They feared Uranus. They feared his vastness, his dominance, his control over the sky itself. One by one, they turned away, unwilling to challenge the father who ruled above them. All but one, Cronus, the youngest of the Titans, stepped forward. He was not the strongest, nor the most radiant, nor the most revered, but he was patient, he watched, he listened. And where others saw only fear, he saw opportunity. "I will do it," he said. Gaia placed the sickle in his hands. And together, they set the first great rebellion of the cosmos into motion. They waited. As Uranus descended once more to cover Gaia in the darkness, Cronus hid in the shadows, silent, unmoving, watching for the moment when the sky would come close enough to strike. And when that moment came, he did not hesitate. With a swift and merciless motion, Cronus rose from hiding and brought the sickle down upon his father. The sky trembled. Uranus cried out, a sound that echoed across the newborn universe as the blade severed him from his power. In that single act, the unchallenged rule of the sky was broken. Blood fell upon the earth, and from that blood, new beings would rise, creatures of vengeance, of fury, of wild and untamed force. But in that moment, what mattered most was this: the father had been overthrown by the son. Uranus, wounded and defeated, withdrew into the heavens, no longer pressing down upon the earth. The world, for the first time, had space to breathe. Cronus had won, but in that victory lay the seed of something darker. For as Uranus retreated, he spoke a final truth, a curse, or perhaps simply a warning. Just as I have been overthrown by my son, so too shall he be overthrown by his own. It was not a new idea. It was a pattern, a cycle, and Cronus, though now king of the cosmos, had already heard it. Thus began the age, of the Titans. But beneath the triumph, beneath the rising order, something had already taken root. The same fear that had driven Uranus to cruelty now whispered in the mind of Cronus. The fear of being replaced, the fear of losing power, the fear of one's own children. And so the cycle continued. From chaos came creation. From creation came power. From power came fear. And from fear came the beginning of an endless struggle between fathers and sons, rulers and heirs, a pattern that would echo not only among gods, but among mortals for all time. The fall of Uranus did not bring peace. It brought power, and power, once seized, is never quiet. When Cronus struck down his father and cast him from dominion, the sky itself seemed to recoil. For the first time, the heavens were no longer pressed tightly upon the earth. The world expanded. It breathed. Space opened where there had been none. And in that vast new silence, Cronus rose. He became the ruler of all that existed, the king of the cosmos, lord of sky and earth alike. The Titans, his brothers and sisters, gathered beneath him, and for a time, the universe entered what later poets would call a golden age. It was an age without war, without suffering, without decay. The world was young, untouched by hardship. The earth gave freely, and life moved in quiet harmony. There were no kings among mortals yet, no cities, no hunger, no fear. But beneath this calm surface, something darker had already taken root. For as Uranus fell, he did not leave in silence. His final words lingered, echoing through time like a shadow that could not be escaped. Just as I have been overthrown by my son, so too shall he be overthrown by his own. It was not merely a curse, it was a pattern, and Cronus heard it. At first, he dismissed it. He had won. He had defeated a god older and greater than himself. He had seized the throne through cunning and strength. What child could possibly rise against him? But time has a way of turning certainty into doubt, and doubt into fear. Cronus began to think. He remembered the look in Uranus's eyes, the shock, the betrayal, the inevitability of it all. He remembered how easily power had changed hands, how quickly the ruler of the cosmos had fallen. And slowly, almost without realizing it, Cronus became what he had once overthrown, a ruler afraid of his own children. Still, he took a queen. Rhea, his sister, gentle yet strong, became his consort. She was not like Cronus. Where he grew suspicious, she remained nurturing. Where he saw threats, she saw life. Together, they stood at the center of a world that seemed, for a time, perfect. And then the children came. The first was Hestia. When she was born, Rhea held her with joy, a new life brought into a peaceful world. But when she placed the child into Cronus's arms, something in him shifted. The prophecy returned, the warning, the future he feared. And without hesitation, without anger, without even visible emotion, Cronus opened his mouth and swallowed her whole. There was no cry, no struggle. One moment she existed, the next she was gone. Rhea stared in horror. Cronus spoke calmly, as if explaining something inevitable. It was necessary, he said. It was the only way to ensure that the prophecy would never come to pass. And so it continued. Demeter was born and swallowed. Hera was born and swallowed. Hades and swallowed. Poseidon and swallowed. 5 children, each taken the moment they entered the world, hidden within their father's body like seeds buried in darkness. They did not die, but they did not live. They existed in silence, trapped within the very being that had given them life. Rhea endured, but each time something inside her broke. She was a mother forced to watch her children vanish, one by one, into the emptiness of fear. She wept, she pleaded, she begged Cronus to stop, but his mind had already been consumed by the same terror that had driven Uranus before him. The fear of losing power, the fear of being replaced. And fear, once it takes hold, does not listen to reason. It only demands control. By the time Rhea carried her 6th child, she knew she could not let it happen again. This time, she would not obey. This time, she would act. When the moment of birth came, she did not go to Cronus. She fled instead, far from his reach, to the island of Crete, a place hidden by mountains and caves, where the sky could not easily see. There, in secret, she gave birth to her youngest son, Zeus. From the moment he was born, there was something different about him. His presence felt heavier, sharper, as though fate itself had taken form. His cry echoed through the caves, and the earth seemed to listen. But there was no time to linger. Rhea knew Cronus would come. To deceive him, she wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and carried it back to her husband. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. She presented the bundle as her newborn child. Cronus did not question it. Blinded by fear, he took the stone and swallowed it, just as he had done with the others. And in that moment, the deception was complete. Zeus lived. Hidden away in the caves of Crete, he was raised in secrecy. Nymphs cared for him, and the goat Amalthea fed him with her milk, giving him strength beyond that of any mortal child. Around him, warriors known as the Curetes clashed their weapons together, drowning out the sound of his cries so that Cronus would not hear. And so Zeus grew, not in a palace, not under a throne, but in hiding, shaped not by comfort, but by destiny. As he came of age, the truth was revealed to him. He learned of his siblings, swallowed and imprisoned. He learned of his father's fear. He learned of the prophecy. And he understood something that Cronus never had. That fear does not prevent fate. It creates it. With the help of Metis, the goddess of wisdom, Zeus devised a plan, not of brute force, but of cunning. He would not attack blindly. He would undo his father from within. Disguised, Zeus returned to Cronus and offered him a drink, a potion crafted with care and intention. Cronus, unaware, consumed it, and then the past began to return, one by one. The children he had swallowed were forced back into the world. Hestia emerged first, then Demeter, then Hera, then Hades, then Poseidon, not as infants, but as fully formed gods, reborn into a world that had waited for them. For the first time, the 6 siblings stood together, not as victims, but as a force, and they turned their eyes toward the throne. Cronus, who had sought to prevent his downfall, now stood before the very future he had tried to destroy. The prophecy had not been avoided. It had been fulfilled, because in trying to control fate, he had ensured it. Thus began the next great conflict, the war that would shake the heavens and split the world. But long before the battles were fought, long before the thunderbolts were cast, the tragedy had already been written. A father afraid of his children, a ruler consumed by the fear of losing power, and a cycle that could not be broken, only repeated. For in the world of gods, as in the world of men, the greatest danger is not strength, it is fear. And fear, when tied to power, does not preserve a kingdom, it destroys it. The return of Cronus's children did not restore peace, it shattered it. What had been hidden in silence for years, fear, betrayal, and prophecy, now stood fully revealed. The children whom Cronus had tried to erase had returned, not as helpless infants, but as gods, awakened and united. And at their center stood Zeus, young, yet unyielding, born in secrecy, raised in shadow, and shaped by a destiny no force could suppress. The moment had come. The age of the Titans was ending, but it would not end quietly. It would end in war. A war unlike any that had come before, for there had been no wars before this. No armies, no battlefields, no destruction on such a scale. This would be the first true conflict of the cosmos, a struggle not just for power, but for the right to shape the future of existence itself. The Titans, led by Cronus, gathered their strength upon Mount Othrys, ancient and immovable. They were vast, elemental beings, tied to the foundations of the world. They had ruled since the dawn of creation, and they would not surrender that power easily. Across from them, Zeus and his siblings took their stand upon Mount Olympus, a place that had not yet earned its name, but would soon become the center of divine rule. Thus began the Titanomachy, the War of the Titans. For 10 years, the battle raged. The sky darkened with storm and fire. The earth trembled beneath the weight of clashing powers. Oceans surged, mountains cracked, and the very fabric of the world seemed ready to tear apart. Zeus fought with fury and purpose, but at first, neither side could gain the upper hand. The Titans were ancient, they were strong, and they knew the world in ways the younger gods did not. Cronus himself stood at the heart of the conflict, unyielding, relentless, driven not only by power, but by the same fear that had led him to swallow his children. He would not fall as Uranus had fallen. He would not be replaced, not again, and so the war dragged on. Year after year, blow after blow, neither victory nor defeat, only endless struggle. But Zeus began to understand something his father never had. Strength alone would not win this war. The Titans had ruled the world from the beginning. To defeat them, he would need more than force. He would need allies. And there were powers, still hidden powers, long forgotten, buried deep within the earth. Gaia, the Great Mother, who had once guided Cronus, now turned her attention to Zeus. She remembered the past, the imprisonment of her monstrous children, the suffering that had never been undone, the Cyclopes, the Hecatoncheires, still chained in the depths of Tartarus, still waiting. Gaia spoke to Zeus, not with commands, but with truth. If you wish to win, she told him, you must free what your father feared. And so Zeus descended, deep beneath the earth, into Tartarus, the same abyss that had once been a place of imprisonment, now a place of forgotten power. There, in darkness, older than memory, he found them, the Cyclopes, bound in chains, the 100-handed ones, buried in silence. Zeus broke their bonds, and in that moment, the balance of the war began to shift. The Cyclopes, grateful for their freedom, did not offer loyalty through words, but through creation. They forged weapons unlike anything the cosmos had ever seen. For Zeus, they crafted the thunderbolt, a weapon of pure force, lightning given form, capable of tearing through sky and earth alike. For Poseidon, they created the trident, a symbol of dominion over the seas, a tool that could shake the oceans and split the land. For Hades, they gave the helm of darkness a cloak of invisibility, allowing him to move unseen, a master of shadows and silence. These were not merely weapons, they were symbols, the tools of a new order. And then came the Hecatoncheires. Released from their prison, they did not hesitate. With 100 arms each, they hurled mountains as though they were stones, striking the Titans with overwhelming force. Their fury was ancient, their strength unstoppable, and for the first time in 10 years, the war began to turn. Zeus rose into the sky, thunder gathered in his hands. Lightning split the heavens. The world shook. The final battle had begun. The Titans fought with everything they had. Cronus stood firm, refusing to yield, striking back with the strength of an age that did not want to end. The clash between old and new reached its peak. Force against force, past against future, but the tide could no longer be stopped. With the thunderbolt in his grasp, Zeus unleashed a storm unlike anything the world had ever known. Fire rained from the sky, the earth split open, the seas roared, the Titans began to fall. One by one, they were driven back, overpowered not just by strength, but by the combined force of allies, weapons, and strategy. And in the end, Cronus was defeated, not slain, but overthrown. Just as he had once overthrown his father, the pattern had repeated itself once more. The Titans were cast down into Tartarus, the very prison they had once used to bind others. There, behind gates of bronze, guarded by the 100-handed ones, they were chained, their voices swallowed by the depths of the earth. Only a few were spared, those who had not fought or who had chosen the side of Zeus. The war was over, the sky cleared, the storms faded, and the world, scarred and broken, began slowly to heal. Zeus stood victorious, but his victory was not simply the defeat of his enemies. It was the birth of a new order. The age of the Titans had ended. The age of the Olympians had begun. Yet even in triumph, there was a quiet truth that could not be ignored. This new world had not been created through peace. It had been forged through war, through destruction, through the fall of one generation and the rise of another. Order, it seemed, did not come from harmony. It came from conflict, from struggle, from the breaking of what came before. And so the cosmos moved forward, not as a perfect system, but as a living one shaped by power, by change, and by the endless cycle of rise and fall. For the war had ended, but the pattern remained. And somewhere, deep beneath the surface of victory, the same question lingered. If the Titans could fall, what would come next? When the war ended, the silence that followed was unlike anything the world had ever known. For 10 long years, the heavens had burned, the earth had trembled, and the seas had roared with the fury of gods. Now, all was still. The Titans had fallen, cast into the depths of Tartarus, their voices swallowed by darkness. The storm had passed, but victory, as Zeus soon understood, was only the beginning. For conquering the world was one thing, ruling it was another. The cosmos, though vast, could not remain without order. The old rule had been broken, but nothing yet had replaced it. Without structure, without balance, even victory would turn to chaos once more. And so, at the dawn of this new age, the gods faced a question greater than war. Who would rule, and how? Zeus stood at the center of it all. Though not the eldest by birth, he was first in strength, first in action, and first in victory. It was his will that had turned the tide, his thunderbolt that had shattered the old order. The others looked to him, not because he demanded it, but because he had proven himself. Yet Zeus did not claim everything. Perhaps he remembered the fate of Uranus. Perhaps he understood the dangers of absolute power. Or perhaps he simply knew that a world divided was more stable than one ruled alone. He had two brothers, Poseidon and Hades. Each had fought beside him. Each had suffered. Each had earned a place in the new order. And if the world was to endure, it could not be held by one alone, not even by a king of gods. And so, they chose not to fight. They chose to divide. Not through argument, not through force, but through fate itself. They cast lots. It was a simple act, yet sacred. For in the casting of lots, even gods submitted to something beyond their will, a quiet acknowledgement that destiny still moved beneath all things. When the lots were drawn, the world itself was divided into three great realms. To Zeus fell the sky, the vast, open heavens, the realm of clouds and storms, of lightning and thunder. It was the highest domain, the one that stretched above all others, touching both the earth below and the stars beyond. Zeus became Lord of the sky, King of gods and men. His voice would be heard in thunder. His anger would flash in lightning. The eagle would become his symbol, soaring higher than any creature, just as he ruled above all others. Yet his rule was not only power, it was judgment. He became the keeper of order, the one who upheld law among gods and mortals alike. His throne would stand upon Mount Olympus, high above the world, where no mortal could easily reach. To Poseidon fell the sea, deep, restless, and untamed. The oceans, the rivers, the springs that flowed from the earth, all came under his dominion. The sea was not a calm realm, nor an easy one. It shifted, it roared, it swallowed, and gave life in equal measure. Poseidon ruled it with strength and pride. With his trident, he could stir storms, shatter cliffs, and command the tides themselves. Beneath the waves, he built his palace of coral and gold, a kingdom hidden from the eyes of men. His realm was beautiful, but never safe. To Hades fell the underworld, the land beneath the earth, where the dead would go when their lives ended. It was not a place of glory, nor one of celebration. It was quiet, shadowed, and eternal. Many would have rejected such a domain, but Hades did not. He accepted it with calm resolve. He became the ruler of the unseen, the judge of souls, the guardian of all that lay hidden beneath the surface of the world, both the dead and the riches buried deep within the earth. He did not seek praise. He did not seek power over others. He simply ruled, and in doing so, he maintained the balance between life and death itself. Thus, the world was divided. Sky, sea, underworld, 3 realms, 3 rulers. And between them all lay the earth Gaia herself, shared by all, yet owned by none. It was a place where gods could walk, and mortals would one day rise. A place of change, of growth, of conflict and creation. It was the meeting point of all realms, the stage upon which the stories of gods and men would unfold. With the division complete, the new order took shape. High above it all stood Mount Olympus. It was not merely a mountain, but a boundary, a place where the mortal world ended and the divine began. Its peaks were hidden in cloud, untouched by storm or decay. Its halls were said to be made of light and stone, its air too pure for mortal breath. There, Zeus gathered the gods, and so began the Olympian court. But these gods were not like the Titans. They were not distant forces of nature alone. They were something more, and something closer. They were reflections of life itself. Athena stood among them, born not from a mother, but from the mind of Zeus. She was wisdom and strategy, calm and precise, a goddess of thought as much as war. Where others relied on strength, she relied on reason. Apollo came next, radiant and golden, the god of light, music, prophecy, and healing. His presence brought clarity and order, yet he could also bring plague and destruction. In him, balance lived. Artemis, his twin, walked the wild places of the world. Goddess of the hunt, of the moon, of untouched nature, she answered to no one. Swift, silent, and fierce, she protected the wild and punished those who violated it. Ares, god of war, embodied conflict in its rawest form. Not strategy, not justice, only blood and battle. He was feared more than loved, for war without reason brings only ruin. Aphrodite, born from the sea, brought beauty, desire, and irresistible force. Love followed her, but so did jealousy, betrayal, and destruction. Even the gods were not immune to her power. Hermes moved between all worlds, swift, clever, and unpredictable. Messenger of the gods, guide of souls, patron of travelers and thieves alike. He crossed boundaries that others could not, linking all realms together, and many more gathered, each with their own domain, each with their own will, each with their own flaws. For this was the truth of Olympus. It was not a perfect kingdom, it was a living one. The gods quarreled, they loved, they betrayed. They took sides in mortal affairs, interfered in wars, shaped destinies, and followed their desires just as humans would. They were immortal, but they were not beyond emotion. In them, the universe had taken on something new, not just form, not just power, but personality. Olympus was not merely a place of rule. It was a reflection, a mirror of the world below. For just as mortals would build cities, form alliances, fall into conflict, and struggle with pride, love, and ambition, the gods did the same, only on a greater scale. And so the new age began, the age of Olympus. An age not of silent forces, but of living stories, of gods who walked among men, of power shared, yet never entirely stable. For though the world had been divided, though order had been established, one truth remained unchanged. Power, once held, is never free from tension, and even on Olympus, beneath the calm of clouds and the glow of divine halls, the seeds of future conflict had already been sown, because the gods, for all their greatness, were not above the world they ruled. They were part of it, and like all things in the cosmos, they too were bound by change. Even as the gods took their thrones upon Olympus, and the world settled into its new order, something was still missing. The earth was vast and alive. Forests grew, rivers flowed, beasts roamed beneath the open sky. The seasons turned in quiet rhythm, and yet there was no one to witness it, no voice to name it, no mind to question it. The world existed, but it was not yet understood. It was Prometheus who saw this, a titan by birth, yet not like the others. Prometheus stood between two ages, the old world of Titans and the new rule of the Olympians. He had sided with Zeus during the Great War, not out of loyalty, but out of foresight. His name itself meant forethought, and it defined him. Where others acted, he considered. Where others obeyed, he questioned. And when he looked upon the empty world below Olympus, he saw not perfection, but potential. So he began to create. From the clay of the earth, from the dust shaped by Gaia herself, Prometheus formed the first humans. He molded them carefully, giving them upright bodies, hands capable of crafting, and eyes that looked forward rather than down. He shaped them, not as beasts, but in the image of the gods, thinking beings, capable of learning, of remembering, of becoming something more. And when their forms were complete, he gave them breath. Life stirred within them. The first humans opened their eyes. But they were weak. They had no claws, no fangs, no fur to protect them from the cold. They could not run as fast as beasts, nor fight as fiercely. They stood exposed beneath the vast sky, fragile, uncertain, and alone. Prometheus saw their struggle. He saw them shiver in the night, fear the darkness, and fall prey to the world around them. And he understood that creation alone was not enough. They needed a gift, so he went to Olympus. He stood before Zeus and asked that humans be given something to help them survive, something that would lift them above mere instinct, something that would allow them to grow. But Zeus refused. He had only just secured his throne. The memory of rebellion was still fresh. The fear of being overthrown still lingered in his mind. He saw in humanity not promise, but danger. They are meant to be weak, Zeus declared. Let them live, but let them know their place. And with that, he denied them fire. Fire was not merely warmth. It was power. It was transformation. It was knowledge. To possess fire was to step closer to the divine, and Zeus would not allow it. But Prometheus did not accept this. He had created humanity. He had seen what they could become, and he refused to let them remain helpless. So he chose defiance. In secret, he ascended to Olympus. He moved quietly, unseen, until he reached the forge of Hephaestus, where divine flames burned brighter than any fire on earth. From that sacred place, he stole a single spark, small, yet filled with infinite possibility. He hid it within a hollow stalk and carried it down to the world below. When he gave fire to humanity, everything changed. Flames flickered beneath the night sky. Darkness was pushed back. Cold gave way to warmth. Food could be cooked. Metal could be shaped. Tools could be forged. Light could be carried into the unknown. With fire came knowledge. With knowledge came progress. And with progress came something else. Defiance. Humanity began to rise. They built, they learned, they created. They no longer feared the night as they once had. They began to shape the world around them rather than simply endure it. And Zeus saw this. He saw the smoke rising from the earth. He saw the light where there had once been darkness. And he understood what had been done. His anger was immediate. Prometheus had not just disobeyed him, he had challenged the order of the cosmos. And for that, there would be punishment, not only for Prometheus, but for humanity as well. To punish mankind, Zeus devised something subtle, something that would not destroy them, but would ensure that their existence would never again be free of suffering. He ordered the gods to create a gift, a woman. Hephaestus shaped her from clay, as Prometheus had once shaped man. Athena gave her beauty and grace. Aphrodite gave her charm and desire. Hermes gave her cunning and curiosity. She was perfect. And her name was Pandora, all gifted. But with her came something else, a sealed jar. Inside it were all the miseries of the world. Pain, disease, sorrow, envy, madness, and death. Things that had not yet touched humanity. Pandora was sent to the world of men, and though Prometheus had warned his brother Epimetheus not to accept gifts from the gods, he did not listen. He welcomed her, and in time, driven by curiosity, the very gift given to her by the gods, Pandora opened the jar. The world changed again. The evils poured out, spreading across the earth like a shadow that could not be contained. Suffering entered human life. Hunger, illness, grief, and death became part of existence. Only one thing remained inside: hope. Left behind, whether by accident or by design, a small, fragile light in a world now filled with hardship. But Zeus was not finished. Prometheus would suffer. For his defiance, Zeus ordered him chained to a remote mountain, far from gods and men. There, bound in unbreakable chains, he would endure a punishment that would never end. Each day, an eagle would descend from the sky and tear at his flesh. It would devour his liver again and again, and each night, because he was immortal, his body would heal, only for the torment to begin again the next day, endlessly, without escape, without mercy. Yet Prometheus did not regret what he had done. Even in suffering, he remained defiant, because he understood something Zeus did not. That knowledge, once given, cannot be taken back. That fire, once lit, cannot be extinguished. That humanity, though fragile, would endure. And so the world moved forward, not in innocence, but in awareness, not in peace, but in struggle. For the gift of fire had changed everything. It had given humanity the power to grow, but it had also brought suffering. And in that balance lay a truth that would echo through all ages. That knowledge is never free. That progress always carries a cost. that to rise above the world is also to bear its weight. And so humanity stepped into its future, not as creatures of perfection, but as beings shaped by both gift and consequence, carrying within them the spark of the divine and the burden that came with it. After fire was given to humanity, the world did not stand still. It changed. Not all at once, not in a single moment, but slowly, like a long breath drawn across centuries. Humanity grew, learned, and spread across the earth. But with that growth came something else: decline. The ancient Greeks did not see history as a steady rise toward progress. They saw it as a fall, a gradual descent from perfection into struggle. They spoke of this decline through the ages of man, a sequence of eras, each more distant from the divine than the last, each marked by a change not only in how humans lived, but in what they were. The first was the Golden Age. It came during the reign of Cronus, before the wars of the gods, before fear and punishment had reshaped the world. In that time, humanity lived as if they were close to the divine itself. There was no labor, no suffering, no hunger, no aging, no fear. The earth gave freely. Fruit ripened without effort. Rivers flowed clean and gentle, and the seasons never turned harsh. There were no kings, no laws, no need for them. Justice existed naturally, without force or command. Humans lived long lives, and when their time came, they did not die in pain. They simply drifted into sleep, passing peacefully from existence. Even in death, they were not lost. Their spirits remained, becoming gentle guardians of the world, watchers who moved unseen, protectors of balance and harmony. It was a time of innocence, a time when humanity did not struggle against the world, because the world had not yet turned against them. But no age lasts forever. With the fall of Cronus and the rise of Zeus, the Golden Age came to an end, and in its place came the Silver Age. These humans were not as noble as those before them. They lived long lives, but they were childish, slow to grow, and lacking in wisdom. For many years, they remained dependent and unaware, unable to understand the world around them. And when they finally reached maturity, they did not grow wiser. They grew arrogant. They ignored the gods. They refused to offer respect, to follow order, to acknowledge the forces that shaped their existence. Where the Golden Age had lived in harmony, the Silver Age lived in defiance. Zeus saw this, and he did not tolerate it. In his anger, he destroyed them. Their spirits did not become guardians. They did not linger in honor. They faded into the underworld, forgotten and silent. The world had changed again. Then came the Bronze Age. If the Silver Age was marked by arrogance, the Bronze Age was defined by violence. These humans were strong, powerful in body, fierce in spirit, but their strength did not build. It destroyed. Everything about them was shaped by war. Their weapons were bronze. Their homes were bronze. Their hearts, it was said, were bronze as well, hard, unyielding, and without mercy. They lived for battle. They found meaning in conflict. They did not farm, did not create, did not reflect. They fought, and in the end, they destroyed themselves. Their age ended not with divine punishment, but with their own violence. They vanished into the underworld, leaving behind no legacy but echoes of war. It seemed that humanity was falling further still. And yet, from the ashes of the Bronze Age, something unexpected emerged. A brief return to greatness. The heroic age. This was not an age of peace, nor of innocence, but of legend. In this time, the world was filled with heroes, men and women born from both gods and mortals. They were greater than those who came before, stronger, braver, and more capable of shaping their own destinies. This was the age of Perseus, who slew Medusa, of Heracles, who endured impossible trials, of Theseus, who defeated the Minotaur, of Achilles, Hector, Odysseus, names that would echo through time. They fought monsters, they sailed unknown seas, they built cities, led armies, and carved their stories into the memory of the world. But even this age did not last. Many heroes died young. Many were lost to war. The great conflict of Troy marked both the height and the end of this era, a final blaze of glory before darkness returned. And then came the Iron Age, the age of the present, the age of struggle. In this era, humanity no longer lives in harmony, nor in innocence, nor even in heroic greatness. Life has become difficult. Labor is constant. The earth no longer gives freely, it must be worked, fought, and forced to yield its bounty. Pain is common. Aging is feared. Death is no longer gentle. In this age, trust breaks easily. Families divide. Friends betray one another. Justice, once natural, now falters. Truth is uncertain, and honor is no longer guaranteed. Humans build cities, but they also wage wars. They seek knowledge, but they also suffer from it. They dream, but they struggle to hold on to those dreams. The gods, if they still watch, do so from a distance. And yet, even in this age of hardship, something remains. Hope. A fragile, persistent force that continues despite everything. It is what drives humanity forward, even when the world grows heavier, even when the past seems brighter than the present. For the Greeks, this was the truth of existence. That the world is not improving, it is declining. That each generation stands further from perfection than the last. That what was once effortless has become difficult, and what was once divine has become human. Yet in that decline, there is also something else. Awareness. The knowledge of what was lost. The memory of what once was. And perhaps, in that memory, a reason to continue. For though the golden age is gone, though the world has grown harsher, humanity endures. Not because it is perfect, but because it persists. And in that persistence, in the struggle, in the effort, in the quiet refusal to give in, there remains a different kind of strength. Not the strength of gods, but the strength of those who live, knowing the world is broken, and choosing to move forward anyway. In the age that followed the rise of the gods and the decline of mankind, a new kind of figure emerged, one that stood between the mortal and the divine. They were not gods. They were not ordinary men. They were heroes. Born from the union of gods and mortals, or shaped by destiny itself, these individuals carried within them something greater than human limits, and yet they were bound by human suffering. They could feel pain, make mistakes, and ultimately they could die. But it was in that fragile space between power and mortality that their stories were forged. And among them, three names would rise above all others: Perseus, Heracles, Theseus, each different, each burdened, each destined to struggle not only against monsters, but against fate itself. The story of Perseus begins, as many Greek tales do, with a prophecy. Acrisius, king of Argos, was told by an oracle that one day his own grandson would kill him. Fear, once again, took root where reason failed. And like so many rulers before him, Acrisius chose not to accept fate, but to fight it. He imprisoned his daughter, Dana, within a sealed chamber of bronze, hidden away from the world where no man could reach her. But the gods do not obey walls. Zeus came to her not as a man, but as a shower of golden light, slipping through the cracks of her prison. From that union, Perseus was conceived. When Acrisius discovered the child, he dared not kill them outright. Even kings feared the wrath of Olympus. Instead, he chose a quieter cruelty. He sealed mother and child in a wooden chest and cast them into the sea. But fate does not drown so easily. The chest drifted across the waters until it reached the island of Seriphos, where a fisherman found them and gave them shelter. There, Perseus grew not as a prince, but as a boy shaped by hardship, strong and determined. Yet his trials were only beginning. The king of the island, Polydectes, desired Dana, and to remove Perseus, he devised a task so deadly it seemed certain to end the boy's life. "Bring me the head of Medusa," he said. Medusa the Gorgon, whose gaze turned all who looked upon her into stone. No man had ever faced her and lived. But Perseus did not refuse. With the aid of the gods, he was given the tools he would need. Athena granted him a polished shield, reflective as a mirror. Hermes gave him a curved blade and winged sandals. From hidden sources, he gained a helm of invisibility and a magical pouch to hold his prize. Armed with these gifts, Perseus journeyed to the edge of the world. He did not face Medusa with strength. He faced her with cunning. Using the reflection in his shield, he avoided her deadly gaze. Step by careful step, he approached as she slept, and with one swift strike, he severed her head. From her blood sprang new life: Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, a warrior born in death. Perseus did not linger. He fled before her immortal sisters could reach him, and on his journey home, he found something unexpected. A maiden chained to a rock by the sea, Andromeda, sacrificed to a monster sent by the gods. Perseus did not turn away. He faced the beast and defeated it, not for glory, not for reward, but because he chose to act. He freed Andromeda and took her as his wife. And when he returned, he used Medusa's head to turn Polydectes to stone, ending the tyrant's rule. Yet even in triumph, fate remained. Years later, in a moment of chance or inevitability, Perseus would fulfill the prophecy he had tried to escape. In a contest, he threw a discus that struck and killed an old man in the crowd. Acrisius, his grandfather. Fate had not been avoided. It had only been delayed. If Perseus was the clever hero, then Heracles was something else entirely. He was strength, raw, overwhelming, undeniable. The son of Zeus and a mortal woman, Alcmene, Heracles was marked from birth. Even as an infant, he strangled two serpents sent to kill him, revealing a power that would grow beyond measure. But strength alone did not define him. Suffering did. Hera, jealous and relentless, never forgave his existence. She watched him, waited, and when the moment came, she struck not with weapons, but with madness. In a fit of divine fury, Heracles lost control. And in that madness, he killed his own wife and children. When the madness passed, he saw what he had done, and no strength in the world could undo it. To atone, he sought redemption, and was given a path of suffering, the 12 labors. Tasks so great that no mortal should survive them. He faced the Nemean lion, whose skin could not be pierced, and strangled it with his bare hands. He battled the Hydra, a serpent whose heads grew back when cut, and overcame it through strategy. He captured beasts, cleaned impossible filth, fought giants, journeyed to the ends of the earth, and even descended into the underworld itself. Each labor was not just a test of strength. It was a confrontation with fear, with death, with his own guilt. And through these trials, Heracles changed. He was no longer just a man of power. He became a symbol of endurance, of suffering transformed into meaning. In the end, it was not a monster that killed him, but poison slow, agonizing, inescapable. As it consumed him, he built his own funeral pyre and climbed upon it, choosing his own end. But death did not claim him fully. Zeus raised him to Olympus, and there, at last, Heracles became what he had struggled toward all his life. A god, not born into divinity, but forged into it. If Heracles was strength, and Perseus was cunning, then Theseus was something else again. He was human, not perfect, not unstoppable, but driven. Born of both a mortal king and, in some tales, Poseidon himself, Theseus grew up unaware of his true heritage. But when he came of age, he chose not the easy path, but the dangerous one. He traveled by land to Athens, facing and defeating bandits and monsters along the way, cleansing the roads not just for himself, but for others. His journey was not only about strength, it was about purpose. When he arrived in Athens, he discovered a city bound by fear. Every 9 years, they were forced to send young men and women to Crete to be devoured by the Minotaur, a creature half man, half bull, trapped within a labyrinth from which none could escape. Theseus volunteered, not as a victim, but as a challenger. With the help of Ariadne, who gave him a thread to navigate the maze, he entered the labyrinth. In its twisting darkness, he faced the Minotaur and killed it. And then, guided by the thread, he found his way back. He had done what no one else could. He had faced the unknown and returned. But like all Greek heroes, Theseus was not free from flaw. On his journey home, he abandoned Ariadne, and in his forgetfulness, he failed to signal his success to his father. Believing his son dead, the king threw himself into the sea. Victory had come, but it carried loss. In time, Theseus would become king, uniting Athens, building laws, shaping a city that would rise to greatness. Yet even he would fall. Betrayed, exiled, forgotten. These were the heroes of Greece. Not perfect beings, but struggling ones. Each fought monsters, but also something greater, fate. And in their stories lies a truth that echoes across all ages. That no matter how strong, how clever, or how determined a person may be, they cannot escape destiny entirely, but they can choose how they face it. Perseus met fate with courage. Heracles met it with endurance. Theseus met it with action. And in doing so, they became something more than mortal. Not because they won, but because they struggled. For in the world of Greek myth, the greatest battle is not against beasts or enemies. It is against what is already written. And though fate cannot be undone, it can be faced. After the age of great heroes had begun, when the world was filled with men who dared to challenge monsters and shape their own destinies, there came a story unlike any other. It was not the tale of a single hero, but of many, bound together by ambition, driven by glory, and undone by the very desires that brought them together. This was the story of Jason and the Argonauts. Jason was born not into peace, but into betrayal. His father, Aeson, had once ruled the kingdom of Iolcus, but power, as it so often does, had been taken by force. His own brother, Peleus, seized the throne, fearing any rival who might challenge his rule. And among those rivals was Jason. Still an infant, he was sent away in secret, hidden from the eyes of the man who would have killed him. He was raised far from court, under the guidance of Chiron, the wise centaur who had trained many heroes before him. There, Jason grew, strong, disciplined, and unaware at first of the fate waiting for him. But destiny does not remain hidden forever. When he came of age, Jason returned. He did not arrive with an army. He did not come with threats. He simply stood before Peleus and spoke the truth. I am the rightful heir. Peleus did not deny it, but neither did he surrender. He was too cunning for that. Instead, he offered Jason a challenge, a task so impossible that it would remove him without bloodshed. If you wish to be king, Peleus said, bring me the golden fleece. The golden fleece, a sacred object said to possess divine power, guarded in a distant land beyond the known world. It hung upon a tree, watched by a serpent that never slept. No man had ever claimed it. No man had ever returned from such a journey. Jason accepted, not because it was wise, but because ambition rarely is. To undertake such a quest, he would not go alone. He gathered the greatest heroes of his time, men whose names were already spoken with awe. Heracles joined him, Orpheus, whose music could charm even the stones, Atalanta, swift and fierce, Castor and Pollux, sons of Zeus, 50 heroes in all. Together, they boarded a ship unlike any other, the Argo, built with divine guidance, its prow carved from sacred wood that could speak and warn of danger. It was not just a vessel, but a companion, one that would carry them across unknown seas into legend. And so they sailed, eastward, into danger, into destiny. Their journey was not a straight path, but a series of trials. They encountered lands ruled by strange laws, kings who tested their strength, creatures that defied understanding. Storms rose, alliances formed and broke. Each step forward came with risk, but at last they reached their destination. Colchis, a distant kingdom ruled by King Aeetes, who possessed the golden fleece. Jason did not take it by force. He asked for it, and Aeetes agreed, but only if Jason could complete 3 impossible tasks. He must yoke fire-breathing bulls, plough a field with them, and sow it with dragon's teeth, seeds that would grow into armed warriors, ready to kill. It was not a challenge. It was a death sentence. And this is where the story changed. Because Jason was not alone, Medea saw him. Daughter of the king, priestess of powerful magic, she had lived her life untouched by love, devoted to knowledge and the mysteries of the world. But when she saw Jason, something shifted. Whether by fate or by the will of the gods, she fell in love. And love, in Greek myth, is never gentle. It is powerful, dangerous, and often destructive. Medea chose to help him. She gave Jason a potion to protect him from fire, allowing him to tame the bulls. She taught him a trick. When the warriors rose from the dragon's teeth, he must throw a stone among them, causing them to turn on one another. And so, through her knowledge, Jason succeeded. But the final task remained. The golden fleece itself, guarded by a serpent that never slept. Once again, Medea intervened. With her magic, she lulled the creature into sleep. And Jason, stepping forward, took the fleece at last. The quest was complete, but it came at a cost. Jason did not leave Colchis alone. He fled with Medea, and in doing so, he betrayed everything she had ever known. Her family, her homeland, her past. And Medea did not hesitate. To slow her father's pursuit, she committed an act so terrible it would echo through the rest of her life. She took her own brother and killed him. His body was scattered across the sea. And as her father stopped to gather the pieces, Jason and Medea escaped. The journey home had become something darker, no longer a quest for glory, but a flight from consequences. When they returned to Iolcus, Jason expected his reward, the throne, but Peleus did not yield. Once again, ambition met resistance, and once again, Medea acted. Through deception, she convinced Peleus's daughters that they could restore their father's youth if they cut him apart and boiled him. They obeyed, and Peleus died. But instead of bringing Jason victory, it brought exile. The people, horrified, turned against them. Jason had won the fleece, but he had lost his home. They fled, and for a time, they lived in Corinth. Years passed, and then Jason made a choice that would undo everything. Seeking power, stability, legitimacy, he abandoned Medea and chose to marry a princess of Corinth. A better future, a safer path, a betrayal. And Medea, who had given everything, her loyalty, her home, her soul, was left behind. But she was not powerless. She was not helpless, and she did not forgive. Her revenge was not swift. It was deliberate. She sent gifts to Jason's new bride, beautiful, harmless, and deadly. The garments burst into flame. The princess died, and the fire spread. But Medea did not stop there. To wound Jason completely, she did the unthinkable. She killed their children, his bloodline, his future, his hope. And then she left, escaping beyond his reach, carried away by forces he could not follow. Jason was left behind, victorious once, glorious once. Now alone, broken. In the end, he did not die in battle. He did not fall as a hero. He wandered, forgotten, and one day, resting beneath the rotting remains of the Argo, the ship that had carried him to greatness, a piece of it broke loose and struck him down. So ended the life of Jason, not with triumph, but with silence. The story of Jason is not one of pure heroism. It is a story of ambition, of desire, of choices made in pursuit of greatness, and the cost that follows. He sought the golden fleece, and he found it, but in doing so, he lost everything else. For in the world of Greek myth, ambition is never free. It demands, it consumes, and if left unchecked, it destroys. There are stories of heroes who fight monsters, stories of kings who rise and fall, stories of gods who shape the fate of the world. But among all the myths of ancient Greece, few are as haunting as the tragedy of Oedipus, because this is not a story of external enemies. It is a story of fate itself, and the terrifying truth that no matter how far one runs, destiny waits. Before Oedipus was ever born, his life had already been decided. His parents, King Laius and Queen Jocasta of Thebes, received a prophecy from the oracle. It was simple, and it was horrifying. Their son would grow up to kill his father and marry his mother. It was not a warning, it was a certainty. And so, like many before them, they believed they could escape fate. All they had to do was prevent it from ever beginning. When Oedipus was born, he was not welcomed with joy. He was seen as a threat, a danger, a future crime waiting to happen. Laius made a choice. He ordered the child to be killed. The infant's feet were bound and pierced, and he was left on a mountainside to die, exposed to the cold, to hunger, to the mercy of the wild. A cruel act, but one born from fear. The fear of prophecy, the fear of losing control, the fear of fate. But fate is not so easily defeated. A shepherd found the child. Instead of leaving him to die, he took pity on him and brought him to another kingdom, Corinth. There, Oedipus was raised by King Polybus and Queen Merope as their own son. He grew up in comfort, in safety, believing he was born into royalty, believing he had escaped whatever dangers lay beyond his peaceful life. But destiny does not disappear. It waits. As Oedipus grew older, whispers began, doubts about his origins, questions about who he truly was. And so, like many who seek the truth, he turned to the oracle. He asked not about his past, but about his future, and the answer he received shattered everything. He would kill his father and marry his mother. Horrified, Oedipus made a decision. He would leave Corinth, leave the people he believed to be his parents. He would go as far away as possible, because if distance could break fate, then he would outrun it. He believed that by abandoning his home, he was saving them, saving himself. But in trying to escape destiny, he was walking directly toward it. On the road away from Corinth, Oedipus came to a narrow crossing. There, he encountered a group of travelers. Among them was a man of authority, proud, commanding, unwilling to yield the path. Words were exchanged, tension rose, and in a moment of anger, of pride, of impulse, violence erupted. Oedipus killed the man, and those with him. He did not know who they were. He did not ask. He simply moved on. But that man was King Laius, his father. The prophecy had begun. Oedipus continued his journey until he reached Thebes. But Thebes was not at peace. A monster haunted the city. The Sphinx, a creature with the body of a lion the wings of a bird and the face of a woman. She stood at the gates and asked a riddle to all who passed. Those who failed to answer died. The city lived in fear. No one could defeat her until Oedipus arrived. He faced the Sphinx, listened to her riddle, and answered it correctly. The creature, defeated, destroyed herself, and Thebes was saved. Oedipus was hailed as a hero, a savior, a king. As reward, he was given the throne of Thebes, and the hand of its queen, Jocasta, his mother. Though neither of them knew it, the prophecy was complete, not because Oedipus accepted it, but because he tried to escape it. Years passed. Oedipus ruled well. The city prospered, and for a time, it seemed as though fate had been wrong. But fate does not forget. A plague fell upon Thebes. Crops failed. People died. Suffering spread across the land. Desperate, Oedipus sought answers. And once again, he turned to prophecy. The oracle spoke. The plague would not end until the murderer of King Laius was found and punished. Oedipus swore he would find the killer. He would bring justice. He would save his people. He did not yet realize. He was searching for himself. The truth did not reveal itself all at once. It came slowly, piece by piece. A witness here, a memory there, a messenger, a shepherd, each fragment bringing him closer to something unbearable. Jocasta began to understand first. She begged him to stop asking, to stop searching, but Oedipus refused, because truth, once pursued, cannot be abandoned. And then, at last, it was clear. The child left to die on the mountain. The man killed at the crossroads. The king who ruled Thebes. They were all the same. Oedipus, son of Laius, husband of Jocasta. The prophecy had not been avoided. It had been fulfilled completely. Jocasta could not bear it. The truth was too heavy, too cruel. She took her own life. And when Oedipus found her, he finally understood everything, every choice, every step, every attempt to escape had led him here. In his grief, in his horror, in his overwhelming realization, Oedipus did not blame the gods. He did not blame fate. He punished himself. Taking the pins from Jocasta's garment, he blinded himself. If he had been blind from the beginning, perhaps he would not have seen the path that led him here. Perhaps ignorance would have been mercy. He did not remain king. He did not remain in Thebes. He left, a broken man, a wandering soul, guided by others, unable to see the world he had once ruled, living with the knowledge that no matter how hard he tried, he had never been free. The tragedy of Oedipus is not simply that he fulfilled the prophecy, it is that he tried to avoid it. Every decision he made was meant to escape his fate, and yet each one brought him closer to it. In Greek thought, fate is not something you choose. It is something that unfolds, unavoidable, unchangeable, and often unforgiving. Oedipus was not evil. He was not cruel. He was a man who sought truth, who tried to do what was right, and yet he became the very thing he feared most. Because in the end, the story of Oedipus teaches a single, haunting truth. No matter how far you run, no matter how hard you fight, you cannot escape destiny. There are wars fought for land, wars fought for power, wars fought for survival. But the Trojan War was fought for something far more dangerous: pride, desire, and the fragile ego of gods and men. It did not begin with armies. It began with a wedding, the marriage of Peleus, a mortal king, and Thetis, a sea goddess destined to bear a son greater than his father. All the gods were invited, all but one, Eris, the goddess of discord, and as with all things excluded, she did not forgive. Into the celebration, she cast a single object, a golden apple, simple, beautiful, deadly. Upon it were written 3 words, "To the fairest." At once, 3 goddesses claimed it: Hera, queen of the gods; Athena, goddess of wisdom and war; and Aphrodite, goddess of love. Each believed she alone deserved it. Each refused to yield. And so, the decision was given to a mortal, Paris, Prince of Troy. Paris was not chosen for wisdom, nor for strength, but because mortals are easier to sway, easier to tempt, easier to manipulate. One by one, the goddesses approached him, each offering a gift, each offering a future. Hera promised him power, kingship over all men. Athena offered victory, wisdom, glory in war. But Aphrodite offered something far more irresistible: love, the love of the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen of Sparta. Paris chose Aphrodite, and with that choice, the war was born. Helen was already married to Menelaus, king of Sparta, but Paris, guided by desire and divine promise, went to Sparta as a guest, and left with Helen. Whether she went willingly or not depends on the storyteller, but the result was the same: a broken oath, a stolen queen, a wounded pride. Menelaus called upon the ancient pact. All the kings who had once sought Helen's hand had sworn to defend her marriage. Now they were bound. And so they came. From every corner of Greece, kings, warriors, legends. Agamemnon, brother of Menelaus, led the army. Odysseus, cunning and sharp. Ajax, towering and relentless. And Achilles, the greatest warrior of them all, young, brilliant, doomed. 1,000 ships gathered. The sea darkened with sails. But even before the war began, blood was required. The winds would not blow. The gods demanded sacrifice. And so Agamemnon gave up his daughter, Iphigenia, killed to appease Artemis. A life for a war for pride. At last, the fleet sailed, and Troy awaited. The city of Troy was not weak. Its walls were said to be built by gods. Its people were strong, and among them stood Hector, Prince of Troy, warrior, protector, a man who fought not for glory, but for his home. For 10 long years, the war raged. Battles fought, heroes slain. Cities burned around the edges of a war that refused to end. Neither side could claim victory. Neither side could surrender, because pride would not allow it. But the war's heart was not on the battlefield. It was within men, within their anger, their jealousy, their wounded honor, and none embodied this more than Achilles. When Agamemnon took Briseis, a woman given to Achilles, the great warrior withdrew from battle, insulted, enraged, unwilling to fight for a king he despised. And without Achilles, the Greeks began to fall. Hector led the Trojans forward, driving the Greeks back, burning their ships, breaking their lines. Hope began to fade. Then came Patroclus, friend of Achilles, brother in everything but blood. Unable to watch the destruction, he donned Achilles' armor and entered the battle. And for a moment, the tide turned. But Patroclus went too far. He faced Hector, and Hector struck him down. When Achilles learned of his death, something inside him broke. This was no longer war. This was vengeance. He returned to the battlefield like a storm, unstoppable, unforgiving. He slaughtered men without mercy, until at last he found Hector. They fought before the walls of Troy, a duel that would echo through time. Hector stood for duty. Achilles stood for rage, and rage was stronger. Achilles killed Hector, but victory did not bring peace. Only more grief, more emptiness, more destruction. The war dragged on. Even Achilles would fall, struck down by an arrow to his heel, the only place he could die. Even the greatest hero could not escape fate. And still Troy stood. After 10 years, the city remained unbroken until the Greeks changed their strategy. They did not attack. They disappeared, leaving behind a single object, a wooden horse, massive, silent, mysterious. The Trojans debated. Was it a gift? A trap? A sign? Warnings were given. Voices of caution rose. But pride is a dangerous thing. They brought the horse inside their walls, believing the war was over, believing they had won. That night, as Troy slept, the truth emerged. Greek soldiers, hidden inside the horse, slipped out, opened the gates, and the army returned. What followed was not war, it was destruction. The city burned, its people slaughtered, its history erased in fire and blood. Troy fell, not by strength, not by siege, but by deception. Helen was taken back. The war ended, but victory felt hollow, because nothing remained. The Trojan War was never truly about Helen, nor about land, nor even about victory. It was about pride, the pride of gods who demanded worship, the pride of men who refused to yield, the pride that turns small choices into catastrophic consequences. A single apple, a single choice, a single moment of vanity, and an entire civilization was reduced to ashes. In the end, the story of Troy leaves us with a simple truth. Great wars are not always born from great causes. Sometimes they begin with something as small as pride and end with everything burned. The war was over. Troy had fallen, its walls reduced to ash, its people scattered to the winds. The Greeks had won, or so it seemed, because victory is not the same as peace. For 10 long years, they had fought beneath the burning sun, chasing glory, vengeance, and pride. Now, they turned their ships toward home, toward wives, toward kingdoms, toward the lives they had left behind. But the gods were not finished with them, and the war would follow them home. Agamemnon, king of kings, returned first. He sailed proudly back to Mycenae, carrying spoils of war and the illusion of triumph. At his side was Cassandra, the cursed prophetess of Troy. She saw the future clearly. She always had, but no one ever believed her. And this time, no one would listen again. While Agamemnon had been away, his queen, Clytemnestra, had changed. Grief had turned into something darker. She had not forgotten, not the war, not the years of absence, and certainly not the sacrifice of their daughter, Iphigenia, killed by Agamemnon's own hand. For the sake of wind, for the sake of war, she had taken a lover, Aegisthus, and together they had waited. When Agamemnon returned, he did not walk into a home. He walked into a trap. Some say he was killed in his bath. Others say he was entangled in robes, unable to move, struck down like an animal. But all agree on one thing. He died not as a conqueror, but as a victim. Cassandra died with him. Her final prophecy, once again ignored. Thus ended the king who had led 1,000 ships, not in glory, but in betrayal. And Agamemnon was not alone. Many of the Greek heroes would never truly return. Some were lost at sea, others wandered into exile. Some found their homes no longer theirs. The war had changed them, and the world they returned to had changed as well. But none suffered a journey as long or as cruel as Odysseus. Odysseus was not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most feared, but he was the most cunning, the mind behind the Trojan horse, the man who ended the war, and for that, the gods punished him. There is a force in Greek mythology greater than gods, older than Olympus, stronger than thunder, and impossible to escape. It is not a weapon, not a creature, not even a god. It is fate. The Greeks called it Moira, and sometimes they gave it form. 3 figures, silent, unyielding, the Fates, Clotho, who spins the thread of life, Lachesis, who measures its length, and Atropos, who cuts it. No argument, no hesitation, no mercy. Even Zeus, king of gods, could not command them. He could delay, he could influence, but he could not change what had already been woven. Because fate was not a rule, it was reality itself. This is what made Greek mythology so different. The gods were powerful, but they were not all powerful. They feared something beyond themselves. The same thing mortals feared, the same thing that governed all existence. Fate. And yet, humans did not simply accept it blindly. They tried to understand it, to glimpse it, to prepare for it. This is where prophecy was born. Across the Greek world stood sacred places, oracles, gateways between the human and the divine. The most famous of all was Delphi. There, in a temple carved into stone and mystery, sat the Pythia, a priestess of Apollo. She did not speak clearly. She did not give direct answers. She spoke in fragments, in riddles, in truths that revealed themselves too late. Kings traveled for days to hear her words. Warriors sought her blessing before battle. Ordinary people came in fear or in hope, but no one left with certainty. Only interpretation, and interpretation was where tragedy began. A prophecy never said exactly what would happen. It said just enough, enough to be misunderstood, enough to be followed, enough to become real. Oedipus tried to escape his fate and fulfilled it. Croesus believed he would destroy an empire and destroyed his own. Agamemnon sacrificed his daughter to win a war, only to be murdered when he returned home. The Greeks did not believe prophecy could be avoided. They believed it could only be recognized, and even then, often too late. To know the future was not to control it. It was to face it. And beyond life, beyond prophecy, there was one final certainty: death. But to the Greeks, Death was not an end. It was a passage, a descent into a world beneath the earth. That world was Hades. It was not a place of fire and punishment, not a heaven, not a hell. It was something quieter, colder, more absolute. All souls went there, kings and beggars, heroes and cowards, the brave, the forgotten. To reach it, the dead had to cross a river, the river Acheron, guided by Charon, the ferryman. But he did not row for free. A coin was needed, placed in the mouth of the dead. Without it, a soul would wander for 100 years, lost, voiceless, unseen. At the gates stood Cerberus, the three-headed hound, guarding the boundary between worlds, keeping the dead in and the living out. Inside, most souls drifted in the asphodel fields, neither suffering nor joyful, simply existing, a shadow of what they once were. But not all fates were equal. The wicked were sent to Tartarus, a place of punishment, where crimes were repeated eternally. Sisyphus pushed his stone. Tantalus reached for food he could never grasp. Ixion burned on his wheel, and the greatest of heroes were sent to the Elysian fields, a place of peace, of sunlight, of rest beyond struggle. At the center of it all stood Hades, not a monster, not a devil, but a ruler, silent, unchanging, fair in a way that frightened people more than cruelty, because he could not be persuaded. Beside him was Persephone, queen of the underworld, daughter of Demeter, a figure caught between two worlds. Life and death, spring and winter, return and absence. Her story explained the seasons. But more than that, it explained something deeper. That death is not separate from life, it is part of it. This was the Greek understanding of existence. Life was temporary, fate was inevitable, death was certain, but meaning came from how one faced these truths. Heroes did not fight because they could win, they fought because they must. Kings did not rule forever, but they ruled while they could. Mortals did not escape fate, but they could meet it with dignity. This is what the Greeks believed. Not that life was fair, not that the gods would save them, but that understanding was the closest thing to power they had. Because in the end, there is only one truth that echoes through every Greek myth. You cannot escape fate, but you can choose how to face it. There was no great war that ended the gods, no final battle where Olympus fell, no thunderclap marking their last breath. The gods of Greece did not die in fire or blood. They faded, slowly, quietly, like echoes, losing their sound. At first, they were not replaced. They were transformed. When Rome rose to power, it did not destroy Greek mythology. It absorbed it, reshaped it, renamed it. Zeus became Jupiter. Hera became Juno. Poseidon became Neptune. Athena became Minerva. The same gods, but no longer the same stories. The wild, emotional, deeply human gods of Greece became more disciplined, more political, more aligned with empire. They no longer walked freely among mortals. They became symbols of order, of authority, of Roman identity. The myths survived, but something had changed. They were no longer believed in the same way. They were used. At the same time, another force began to rise. Not from conquest, But from thought, philosophy, thinkers like Xenophanes questioned the very nature of the gods. If horses had gods, he said, they would look like horses. Plato argued that true divinity must be perfect, not jealous, not deceitful, not flawed like the Olympians. Others went further. Epicurus claimed the gods existed, but did not care. They did not interfere, did not punish, did not guide. This was a quiet revolution, one that did not burn temples, but emptied them. The gods were no longer feared. They were discussed, analyzed, doubted, and then came something even more powerful. A new kind of belief, Christianity. It did not offer many gods. It offered one, invisible, all-powerful, moral, absolute. Where Greek gods were flawed, this god was perfect. Where Olympus was divided, this god was singular. Where myths told stories of power, Christianity spoke of salvation. Slowly, the old world changed. Temples closed, sacrifices ended, oracles fell silent. The Olympic Games were abolished, and the voices of the gods disappeared from worship. But they did not disappear completely. They remained in stories, in art, in memory. Poets continued to write of them. Artists painted their forms. Sculptors carved their beauty into stone, but no one prayed. The gods had lost their power over the world, but they gained something else, something more enduring. They became symbols. Zeus was no longer just a god of thunder. He became power itself, authority, control. Athena became wisdom, strategy, civilization. Aphrodite became love, desire, the chaos of human emotion. They were no longer worshipped, but they were understood. And in that transformation, they became immortal in a different way. Because belief can fade, temples can crumble, names can change, but stories endure. The myths of Greece did not vanish with the rise of new religions. They adapted, they resurfaced. In Renaissance paintings, in literature, in philosophy, in modern stories, in films, in imagination. The gods no longer live on Olympus, but they live in us, in the way we think, the way we tell stories, the way we understand power, love, fate, and tragedy. And so, in the end, the truth is simple. The gods did not die. They became myth, and myth never truly disappears. And so, the story comes to an end. The gods have faded from their thrones. The heroes have long since fallen silent. And the world they shaped has become only memory and myth. But perhaps that's what makes these stories so enduring. They were never just about gods, or monsters, or wars. They were about us, about fear, hope, love, and the quiet understanding that some things are simply beyond our control. Now, as the night grows deeper, let the stories drift away. There's nothing left to follow, nothing left to hold on to, just the soft silence of the present moment, the steady rhythm of your breathing, the comfort of rest, and the gentle knowing that tomorrow can wait. Sleep well, and I'll see you in the next story.